What up, friends? I'm something of a scientist myself, and today we're going to be reviewing We Are Scientists' newest album, Lobes. This is the 8th album by American indie rock band We Are Scientists. We Are Scientists are probably one of the most consistent acts in the modern indie sphere, I think, with them largely sticking to their guns while also throwing one or two new and interesting elements within each album to help distinguish themselves from each other. You generally know what you're getting into when you approach a record from these guys, and that's not a bad thing. They know what they do, and they do it well. This time around, the band sees themselves taking their indie rock sound and polishing it with a sort of new wave shine. However, I find that this album, while still good, doesn't sound nearly as unique or as energized compared to a lot of their previous albums, especially 2021's Huffy. The first half of the project is one of the big reasons why I don't think this album has much impact overall. Many of the songs on the first half of the project are pretty by the numbers for the group, I have to say, with them being kind of nice indie rock tunes, I suppose, but they just don't really have any distinguishable qualities to them. The bass-heavy opener Operator era is fine enough, and the chorus is pretty catchy. However, the riffs are kind of just your generic indie fare, and I just don't think a lot was really done with it. Sure, it's not a bad track by any means, and yeah, they did play some kind of nifty effects over the riffs and instrumentals and all that here and there. However, it just feels like what we've heard from the band before, just with a slightly, very slightly new coat of paint. The added effects on a lot of these songs from the first half just really aren't enough. Dispense with Sentiment kind of takes that new wave sound and experiments with it further, however, it doesn't really have the energy to fully take advantage of that. The chorus is groovy to match the slower pace of the track, but I can't help but feel underwhelmed by this instrumental overall, despite the vibe being pretty decent. And this is what I'm talking about with these songs from the first half. The tracks are nice, definitely, they're not bad tunes, but they're just incredibly safe for the sound that they were going for. Human Resources is a bit better, I think, in this regard, with the triumphant chorus coming in as the guitar, synths, and beats kind of back us up here and keep the pacing relevant as we're moving along. I'm also a really big fan of those twinkling and billowing synths as the chorus reaches its end. However, the verses feel a little bit barren in comparison. The instrumental here is just kind of boring compared to the more fleshed out chorus. The mixing on this track also sounds a bit compressed, weirdly, preventing the sound of this song from reaching its full potential. There are a few more songs in the first half that, again, are fine, but they just don't really make much of an impact. However, then we get to Settled Accounts, the start of the second half, and this is where the good shit is. It's way more funk-driven compared to the rest of the project, especially with that interesting guitar opener that is a nice segue into the more bassy and synthy elements of this track. The vocals carry a lot of emotion on this one, I think, especially as it has that hint of somberness under the cheery exterior here. The chorus is also catchy as hell, and these samples are also a really interesting choice to kind of segue each part of the track into each other. I find that the pacing and flow of this one is really nice. I also like how the relationship lyrics in this song, while being a standard subject matter for We Are Scientists, they show a bit of uncertainty in the messaging here, like Keith is kind of acknowledging that a lot of his problems are being caused by his own actions. It's a nice self-aware tune that I think showcases how just because We Are Scientists don't always take themselves too seriously, it doesn't mean that there isn't thought behind these songs. Here Goes probably carries the new wave mantle the most, being very bass-driven alongside a bouncy beat and these distorted vocals that give off that sort of electronic feel. It has that sort of like digital movie soundtrack vibe to it, like it could be in the score of like a Blade Runner or Tron movie or something. It's a pretty simple tune overall, but I find that the vocals are very engaging, and the beat is a nice pacemaker to kind of propel the song forward as it progresses. I'm also a really big fan of the fuzzy drums in the chorus of this one, alongside this sort of almost guitar solo that comes in during the bridge as Keith is kind of just going off on the vocal front here. Parachute is a pretty interesting switch up for the project, featuring this very dire sounding acoustic guitar as the lead instrumental on this opener here, alongside this very fuzzy synth that kind of creates this wall of fuzz in the background. It takes up a lot of space, but it's really interesting how it sounds. Whereas Here Goes sounds like it could be the soundtrack to a Blade Runner film, this one almost sounds like it could be the soundtrack of like a sci-fi digital western or something. It's a really unique vibe, both for this project and their entire discography as a whole. They managed to take that new wave sound and apply it in a pretty unconventional direction. I'm a big fan of this one. Less From You is definitely my favorite song on the project overall. This is pure new wave and disco-infused fun. That guitar riff is energizing as hell, and the beat, synth, and vocals, they're all just so anthemic in the best way possible. It's a really lively song overall, and I feel like that kind of recoups the fact that the lyrics are a little basic, but then again, that was also kind of the new wave mindset to begin with, so they're kind of just taking inspiration from their influence here. I would actually argue that a lot of the time the simplicity of new wave lyrics is what helped them become so memorable in general, so I think it works on this track. Those beat breakdowns that show up here, and there are also a really nice callback to this era as well. There's honestly not that much to say about this one, it just captures that new wave and disco cadence really well. It's a solid track. The Miracle of 22, the ending song on the project, it definitely feels like the sort of credits theme of an 80s movie or something like that, but again, it does really fit the vibe of the album overall, and I feel like it was a pretty interesting and fun way to end the album. It may be a little bit less memorable than Less From You, but I do like the return of the acoustic guitar, and I also appreciate how they once again tried doing that distorted vocal effect thing here to pretty engaging results. The suave guitar picking in the background also helps balance out the lighter tone overall that's in the instrumental here and the vocals on this track. That chorus especially, it just really feels like it was made for some sort of coming-of-age film or something. In a funny way, the lyrics on this one kind of back that up, as they largely feel like a love anthem for Gen Z, them trying to make a move when 2022 and 2023 are just apocalyptic. I am tired of living in unprecedented times. So as you can see, the second half of the record really carries it. That's not to say that the first half of the record is bad, it's just, it feels very mundane for the group. It lacks the energy and the wit that I've come to expect from them. New Wave has such a varied sound, same with indie. I feel like they definitely could have taken the instrumentals further because of that, and when your lyrics are kind of your standard We Are Scientists fare as well, the instrumentals really needed to be a bit more interesting and dynamic, and maybe even a bit more experimental to make up for that. There's still fun to be had on here though, and if you're looking for just a very simple and carefree indie rock record, or even indie pop / new wave project, this might be right up your alley. I'm just wishing that they took a little bit more from that 80s new wave direction though, and combined it with their sound even further. If the whole record was filled with the quality of the second half, starting with Settled Accounts, this album would have been non-stop bangers. Overall though, I'm feeling a decent 6 on this newest album by We Are Scientists. Of course, we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and for what it's worth, I think this is a pretty cool album cover overall. I like the sort of muted color scheme, the neon lights being the really big pop of color on this one I think works really well. I don't think they really needed their name up in the upper corner, to be honest. I think it works perfectly fine with just the image and Lobes. But I think it does capture the sort of like new wave aesthetic, although I feel like the sound of the record might be a little too light for the tone of the cover, but I do think it overall captures that sort of 80s feel at least. But of course, those are just my thoughts on this newest project by We Are Scientists. What did you guys think? Do you think this was maybe a bit too par for the course for the group? Maybe they need to go back and try to energize their sound a little bit more? Or do you think this switch up is exactly what they needed? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and maybe I'll make you a scientist too. We'll get that doctorate yet. And until the next one, farewell.